It was a Sunday morning in Lakeville, Indiana, the kind of morning where everything feels too still, too quiet. The kind of morning that makes your skin prickle, like the air itself knows something's not right before you do. Jessie was only 9, but even at that age, you know when something is off. She had just spent the weekend away, sleeping over at a friend's house. It was supposed to be just another lazy weekend, movies, pillow fights, popcorn. A break from the tension she couldn't quite name at home. When Sunday rolled around, Jessie ran back to her house like she always did. Her routine never changed: race to the parsonage next to the church, bang on the door, and hope breakfast was waiting. But this time, the door was locked. And that never happened. Maybe they're still sleeping, she thought. But even that didn't make sense. Her stepfather, Bob, never missed a Sunday service. He was the pastor. He was supposed to be at the pulpit by now. The house, usually so full of life, of voices and motion and clinking dishes, was eerily silent. No footsteps. No laughter. No smell of eggs or bacon. Just nothing. She ran back to the church. Confused. Anxious. Told someone the door was locked. That nobody was answering. That something felt wrong. Within minutes, someone retrieved a master key. What they found inside wasn't just wrong, it was horrific. A scene so brutal, so cold, it would haunt an entire community for decades. Inside that modest, 2-story home, 4 people were dead. Bob. His wife, Dawn. Jessie's 2 younger sisters, Janel and Jolene. All gunned down. Execution style. A shotgun, fired at close range. The kind of violence that didn't belong in a sleepy church town. The kind of violence that didn't belong anywhere. Jessie didn't know, not yet. She was told gently, by a friend's mother, eyes soaked in tears, that her family was gone. Gone. Her entire world, snatched away in a single moment. Just hours before, she'd been a child with a family, a routine, a life. Now she was something else. Alone. Unmoored. She became the girl who survived. The girl who left and returned to an empty house. The girl who came back from a sleepover to find her entire family had been slaughtered. And still, the town had no answers. There were no signs of a break-in. No evidence of a robbery. Nothing was taken, except 4 lives. But there was someone who hadn't been home that weekend. 17-year-old Jeff Pelley, Jessie's stepbrother. He was tall, quiet, kind of awkward, with thick-rimmed glasses and the typical teen angst vibe. Jeff was supposed to be grounded. His father had punished him, taken away his prom privileges after some kind of behavioral issue. But somehow, Jeff had ended up at prom anyway. Dressed in a tux. Smiling for photos. Dancing like nothing was wrong. The timing was tight. Suspiciously tight. Too tight. The question that slowly began to fester in the air, the one nobody dared to say out loud at first, was this. Could Jeff have done it? Could a teenager really kill his entire family, just to go to prom? The idea sounded absurd. Unthinkable. And yet, the more investigators dug, the more that question refused to go away. At the funeral, the pews were packed. The church, Bob's church, was standing room only. Cameras flashed from behind doors. Strangers cried alongside friends. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Jessie sat quietly, blank-faced. Her world a blur of closed caskets and whispered condolences. Jackie, Jeff's sister, wept openly. She had been away at church camp that weekend, unaware of what she was returning to. But Jeff? Jeff didn't cry. He didn't break down. Didn't even flinch. He just sat there. Emotionless. Distant. Like he wasn't there at all. Some chalked it up to shock. Others weren't so sure. And then came the haunting detail Jessie would never forget: the caskets were closed. All 4. No one talked about why, not to her, not really. But she knew. Everyone knew. They had to be closed. Because what was left inside wasn't something a child should ever see. And Jessie, she saw more than she ever should have. She saw the bullet holes. The way her sisters had been found in the basement. One of them cradled in their mother's arms. As if Dawn had tried, in those final moments, to shield her daughter from the inevitable. It wasn't just murder. It was annihilation. And for Jessie, the days that followed were a fog. A blur of strangers, distant relatives, and decisions she had no control over. She was sent away, shipped off to camp with her friend Stephanie, as if a few days of sunshine and crafts could erase what she'd lived through. But grief doesn't work like that. Trauma doesn't disappear because you pretend it never happened. Jessie didn't just lose her family. She lost her home. Her sense of safety. Her identity. They told her to move on. To start over. To forget. So she did the only thing a child can do when the world stops making sense. She changed her name. Dyed her hair. Tried to disappear into someone new. But trauma has a way of waiting. It hides in shadows, in mirrors, in the faces of people who look too much like someone you lost. And for Jessie, it never really left. Not even 30 years later. Because something that broken doesn't heal easily. Especially when the one question that still haunts her is the one no one ever really answered. What happened in that house? And why? Was Jeff really capable of something so monstrous? Or had the real killer walked away unnoticed, while the town pointed fingers at its own? The truth was buried beneath grief, family secrets, and a silence so thick it could smother you. But someone pulled the trigger. And someone got away with it for years. You would think a crime this brutal would spark a media storm, or that a killer bold enough to wipe out a family in a pastor's home would be caught within days. But nothing happened. No arrests. No confessions. Just silence. Time passed, and with it, so did the urgency. But not for Jessie. Not for the families left behind. Not for the investigators who kept circling one name. Jeff Pelley. The boy in the tux. The son who should have been home but wasn't. The only one left standing. He told police he'd left the house around 5:15 p.m. on Saturday, hours before the murders, and didn't return until late the next day. He said he'd driven to a friend's house, played some video games, changed into his tux there, then went to prom with his girlfriend. But something didn't sit right. The timeline felt too clean. Too convenient. A little too rehearsed. And the shotgun, Bob's shotgun, the one used in the killings, it was missing. Just gone. Not in the house, not in the safe, not found anywhere nearby. Almost as if someone had taken it, and made sure it would never be found again. Detectives began to dig deeper. Interviews with Jeff's friends painted a different picture than the one he gave. Some said he seemed anxious that day. Others remembered how determined he was to go to prom, even if it meant going behind his father's back. And that punishment? It wasn't for something minor. Bob had recently discovered Jeff was stealing money, from church accounts, no less. He'd been grounded. Prom canceled. Trip to Great America canceled. Car keys revoked. Bob had planned to confront him again that very Sunday morning. But Bob never made it to the pulpit. That confrontation never happened. And somehow, Jeff still made it to prom, dressed, composed, smiling. The pieces started to click. Too clean a getaway. Too emotionless a response. Too many coincidences. But coincidences aren't proof. And that's where the case hit a wall. No gun. No eyewitnesses. No forensic smoking gun. Just motive and opportunity. And so, the case went cold. Years passed. Jeff moved to Florida. Built a new life. Got married. Had a child. Started working in IT. To the outside world, he was just another guy with a past he didn't talk about. But back in Indiana, that case file never truly closed. In 2002, 17 years after the murders, a cold case unit picked it up again. Technology had changed. Memories had shifted. But the suspicion hadn't faded. If anything, it had hardened into resolve. Investigators re-interviewed witnesses, re-examined the timelines, cross-referenced every movement Jeff made that weekend. They created a detailed timeline, down to the minute, mapping out where Jeff had to be, when, and how long it would have taken him to commit the murders and still make it to prom. And the disturbing part? It was possible. Barely, but possible. He could have pulled the trigger just after 5 p.m., changed clothes, stashed the gun, and driven to his friend's house before anyone even noticed. And the thing about small towns? People notice everything, except the things they don't want to see. In 2005, the police knocked on Jeff Pelley's door. This time, they weren't just asking questions. They were there to arrest him for the murder of his father, his stepmother, and his 2 little sisters. The news hit Jessie like a second wave of grief. She'd spent most of her life running from that house, that memory. And now, the boy she used to call her brother was being accused of turning that house into a slaughterhouse. She didn't want to believe it. But deep down, some part of her had always wondered. The trial didn't happen right away. It would take another 2 years, 2 long years of reliving the past, questioning every detail, every conversation, every look. When it finally began, the courtroom was packed. Cameras lined the hallway. Reporters filled the benches. The weight of a decades-old crime settled over everything like a fog. The prosecution laid out their case with clinical precision. Motive: Jeff was furious with his father, humiliated, desperate to go to prom at any cost. Opportunity: he was the only one unaccounted for during the precise window of the murders. Evidence: the missing shotgun, the inconsistencies in his story, and his eerie calm in the aftermath. They didn't have a murder weapon. But they had something harder to shake. Intent. In a timeline that fit, just barely. The defense argued it was all circumstantial. That there was no physical proof tying Jeff to the killings. That police had zeroed in on him too quickly and ignored other possibilities. That a grieving teenager being quiet didn't make him a murderer. But for the jury, it was enough. In 2007, Jeff Pelley was found guilty. 4 counts of murder. A life sentence. No parole. He was led from the courtroom in handcuffs. Expressionless. Still the boy in the tux, only now, the prom had long since ended. The verdict echoed like a shot through the courtroom: guilty. Some cried. Some felt justice had finally been served. But not everyone walked away with closure. Behind the headlines and court transcripts, there was a question that never really went away. What if they got it wrong? What if the boy in the tux didn't pull the trigger? Jessie tried to move on. Tried to stitch together a life from the broken pieces left behind. But grief doesn't expire with a guilty verdict. It lingers, in photographs, in dreams, in the unspoken silence at family gatherings where half the chairs are forever empty. She changed her name. Dyed her hair. Moved far away from the shadows of Lakeville, Indiana. But the past doesn't care about new beginnings. It doesn't die just because someone's behind bars. It breathes. It festers. And for Jessie, it haunted. She replayed that weekend over and over in her mind. The missed phone calls. The locked doors. The image of the church packed with mourners, for caskets lined in front of the altar where her stepfather once preached. Closed caskets. Because the truth inside them was too horrific to show. And the boy who'd once been her stepbrother, he never once cried. But then again, neither did she. The trauma had carved something deep and permanent inside her, something that didn't know how to grieve the right way. Years passed, but the doubt stayed. Not just for Jessie. For others too. Some said Jeff had no history of violence. No clear signs of psychopathy. No blood on his clothes, no fingerprints on the crime scene. Just motive in a timeline that barely held together. Others argued that it didn't matter. The rage was enough. The opportunity was enough. What more could you expect when the killer took the murder weapon with him? Still, a different kind of question began to grow. Not just did Jeff do it, but what kind of system convicts someone on circumstantial evidence alone? There were no eyewitnesses. No physical proof. No DNA. Just suspicion and theory. And a jury who believed a teenage boy could annihilate his entire family, clean up, and go to prom like nothing happened. It didn't help that the prosecution's case was built around inconsistencies in Jeff's alibi, an alibi that relied on teenage friends and vague memories. But how clear is anyone's memory 17 years later? One of Jeff's friends said he saw him that night, clean, calm, normal. No blood. No panic. Just a boy in a tux with his date. The image of a killer? Or just a kid escaping a house full of secrets? The defense had tried to argue that someone else could have done it, maybe a stranger, maybe a burglary gone wrong. But there were no signs of forced entry. Nothing stolen. Just a family, executed room by room, in their Sunday best. And that made people uncomfortable. Because if Jeff didn't do it, then someone else got away with murder. The town didn't want to believe that. The jurors didn't want to believe that. So they chose the story that made the most sense. Even if it wasn't airtight. Even if it left questions behind like bloodstains you can't quite scrub away. To this day, Jeff Pelley maintains his innocence. He says he didn't kill his father. Didn't kill Dawn. Didn't shoot those two little girls, his stepsisters, in the head while they watched cartoons. He says he loved them. But love doesn't always mean safety. And sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones with the most to hide. Jessie has spoken publicly about the murders in the years since, hesitantly, painfully. She remembers Bob as strict, controlling, a man with a temper. She remembers being afraid of him. And she remembers Jeff, too. Tall, quiet, withdrawn. She wonders now if there were signs she missed, things that didn't make sense back then that might have been clues. Or maybe, she wonders if she simply needed someone to blame. Someone to anchor all that pain. Because no child should have to grow up haunted by the image of her sister's bodies lying in a basement, next to the mother who tried, in her final moments, to shield them from a shotgun blast. But that's what Jessie carries. That's what this story leaves behind. Not just a conviction. Not just a crime. But a fracture that never healed. A question that still echoes across courtroom halls and childhood bedrooms. What really happened that night before prom? And what kind of rage does it take to destroy an entire family, just to make it to a dance? But time doesn't erase a crime like this. It only stretches it, pulls the pain thinner, but never quite snaps it. Jeff Pelley was behind bars. Life sentence. No parole. But for some, especially those who knew the family before that April night in 1989, something still didn't sit right. The evidence against Jeff had always been circumstantial. No murder weapon. No forensic trail. Just timing. Motive. And that cold, empty look in his eyes. But was that enough? Jeff's appeals began not long after his conviction. His lawyers argued the case had been built more on emotion than fact, that prosecutors had painted a picture of a resentful teen who snapped. But pictures aren't proof. The appeals court didn't budge. But outside the courtroom, the story was evolving. Documentaries, podcasts, investigative blogs, all started peeling back the layers. Some pointed out that the police had tunnel vision from the start. That once they focused on Jeff, they stopped looking anywhere else. One claim stood out: the original investigation may have ignored, or buried, critical leads. There were whispers about strange vehicles seen near the house that weekend. About a suspicious figure spotted near the church grounds early that Sunday. About Jeff's father, Bob, and the enemies he may have made during his time as a police officer before becoming a pastor. But none of it was ever seriously followed up. Because they already had their suspect. And a jury who wanted a clean ending. But the story was never clean. It was blood and silence. It was 4 lives erased in the span of minutes. It was a prom night memory twisted into a lifelong nightmare. And still, no confession. No eyewitness. No weapon. Just a teenager who never got to be one. Some still insist Jeff did it. That no one else could have pulled it off. That the rage had been building for years. A controlling father. A forbidden prom. A snapped mind. Case closed. But others look at the same puzzle and see gaps. If Jeff did kill his family, how did he clean up so fast? How did he make it to prom without a trace? Without even smudging his shoes? And if he didn't do it, who did? There's one more haunting truth. Jeff's date that night, Darcy, never testified that anything felt off. No blood. No strange behavior. Just a quiet guy, maybe a little distant, but not a killer. And yet, what kind of person dances the night away with the smell of gunpowder still on his skin? That's the problem with this case. Every answer opens another question. Every theory tears open another wound. Jessie, the little girl left behind, still lives with the echoes. She's spoken about forgiveness. About trying to let go. But she never got a real answer. Just a conviction. Just silence. She says her memories of that day are a blur, except the caskets. 4 of them. Closed. Side by side. She remembers thinking how final it felt. How unreal. How cold. She remembers the quiet at the church. The smell of the wood pews. The way the whole town seemed to stop breathing. And she remembers one more thing. That look on Jeff's face. Blank. Empty. Not sadness. Not guilt. Just nothing. But even now, she admits she's not sure what that meant. Nobody is. Because this story has no clean ending. No moment of clarity. No deathbed confession. Just a house now empty. A family wiped out. A boy in prison. And a question that refuses to die. Was Jeff Pelley a cold-blooded killer, or the last surviving victim of a crime no one ever really solved?